Hello and welcome to another edition of the Front Page on GNAT TV. My name is Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. And it's also my pleasure to have with us here in the studios of GNAT, Bill Schmick, who is an investment advisor and portfolio manager with Berkshire Money Management based in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He's also a columnist that we feature from time to time in the Journal. And Bill, it's a real pleasure to have you here today with us to talk about retirement.
Retirement. Thank you, Andrew. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it's an issue. It's an issue, of course, that a lot of folks are beginning to contemplate, myself included, and it sort of comes up with a rush at you all of a sudden. Let's unpack this a little bit. I mean, the big picture, I guess, is we have a large cohort of baby boomers who are, well, already in retirement age.
76.4 million.
Okay, that's a lot of folks,
Yes.
and a lot more to come. And
225,000 a day.
oh, ouch!
That's what's going on.
We're in good company. Against that kind of big picture, let's drill down a little bit into those numbers and sort of take it down to a personal level, I guess you could say. For the person who's in their, let's say, late 50s or early 60s and is now all of a sudden confronting the reality of retirement, what are some of the factors that should go into their planning for that? Or have they already kind of missed the boat and it's already too late to really do planning per se? But what should the folks in that age bracket be doing or thinking about now?
Well, I meant, by the way, 225,000 people are retiring a month, not a day. But it's interesting, the Federal Reserve Bank had just released a study a week or so ago that said 31% of Americans have no savings for retirement, and 19% of baby boomers have no savings for retirement.
When we say no savings,
they live from paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
Yes. So 19% of those are people between 55 and, say, 65, okay, that have 10 years to go and have 19% have no savings. Whereas the younger people and the 31%, that's almost a third of the nation. So what can they do now? Okay. Well, the first thing is, let's address the 55 to 66 years old, because that's roughly where you're going to target retirement and Social Security. So from 55 to 66, if you have a 401k plan at work or a 403b plan at work, you better tighten your belt and contribute the maximum amount that you can to that plan at your whoever your employee is. If you can't, you can always open up a contributory IRA, and you can, at over 50, you can invest $6,500, contribute $6,500 a year. Now that's not a lot, okay, but it depends on how much you're making. All right. Now, if you're making $45,000 a year, $6,500 is a big whack. Okay. If you're making $100,000, $23,500, which is the maximum that you can contribute in a 403b or 401k plan, is also a big whack. So what am I saying? I'm saying if you don't have the savings now, don't wait until you're 66. You're going to have to tighten your belt right now.
Because Social Security alone is not going to cover or keep you living at a level or quality of life that you think you want to be living at.
You will be in the supermarket bagging food at 82, if you think that's the case. No, Social Security was never meant to be a sole retirement income. It had always been a supplement to the amount of money you have saved during your lifetime.
Okay.
So, of course, some of the savings plans for people your age and my age weren't around when we were 22 or 21. Okay, I mean, even 401ks and 403bs, which are tax-deferred retirement plans, came about when we were in our 40s. So did IRAs. The young people have it lucky in that respect that they can contribute now. Of course, they don't, okay, because they don't think, A, that they're ever going to retire or ever die.
Or they need the money right now.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
That's given the economy and the unemployment situation, you're right.
Yeah.
They need the
Putting
money
kids through
right now.
college and all of that.
Yeah.
The cost of living is,
Yeah.
and their salaries as a rule, as a group, aren't keeping pace.
Right. We didn't have to worry about that back in my father's age because most corporations and companies paid a pension, big ones, okay? If you're a small business, you just saved. But that changed, and now in today's age, less than 17% of all corporations still pay a pension.
Well, for those folks who are watching and thinking about this, when is a good time to really begin to plan for retirement? When you're 21 or 22, or when you just get out of college, during your first job? Or is there some rule of thumb that says, well, you can wait until you're 35 or 40 before you really begin to have to think about, socking away the cash you're going to want to have when you're 65 or 70?
When you have a W-2.
Okay.
If you're 66 years old and you have a W-2, that's the time to open up an IRA. I have clients, for example, who have a local wholesale meat company, okay? And for the grandkids, every year since they were 6 or 7 years old, they put them on commercials. Why? So they could contribute to their IRA. So that's somewhat extreme, but if you have a W-2, you can start to save. Now, let's take my daughter. She's 35, okay? Only since I have a grandchild now, 2 years old, only since that child was born had she even thought about contributing to an IRA or a 401k, no matter how much I had begged her to start doing it. Suddenly, though, with a son, she's changed her mind. I've talked to a lot of children of my clients and implored them that when they have a job, when they can afford to do it, even if it's $500 a year, to put it in there, because the beauty is the compounding of $500 a year over the course of the next 30 years could make somebody, depending upon what happens to the markets, that could be $500,000 in 30 years for $500 a year. Now, most people can afford that, okay, but do they? No. Is it hard to do? Is it hard to open up an IRA? Absolutely not. You could go to your local bank, go in there for nothing, and they'll do it for you. All you have to do is fill out a form, and you don't have to invest the maximum of $5,000 or $6,500 if you're over 50.
So what is one question that seems to come up a lot is when should I retire? At what point, what age should I retire? Now, as I understand it, you can start collecting Social Security at 62, but the payout is much smaller than if you wait even just a few years until you're 65 or 66.
Yes.
Is there any Beyond that, is there any advantage to working longer? And let's say you want to work longer. Let's say you're physically capable, you're not tired and worn out or whatever, and you'd like to work until you're 70 or maybe even longer than that. I mean, is there any rule of thumb around what is the best time to retire?
Yes, there is. Okay. I'm 65. I never want to retire. I love what I'm doing. I just eat it up. Okay. And I know what would happen if I did retire. I'd be a dog walker because I've got a chocolate lab that's very frisky. And if I wasn't walking the dog, I'd be cooking dinner. Okay. So I love what I do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to plan to work until they drag me out of there, 71, 72. I have good health. You look like you've got good health too. Now, every year after 66 that I wait to retire, I gain yearly about 6 to 8%. That's the rough average, okay? So if you're 66 and you wait till you're 67, your Social Security payment for that year will increase by 6 to 7%. Now, look at interest rates today. There is no interest rates. The U.S. Treasury, even the 30-year Treasury is trading below 4%. A 10-year Treasury is 2.3%. So what I'm saying is that you are making the spread between interest rates, because let's think you have the money, you could take your Social Security payment at 62 and you could put it in the bank and get an interest rate for it. You're only going to get you'll probably get 1% a year. Whereas if you continue to work, that increase in your Social Security benefit is 6 to 8%. So they're paying you to hold off on retiring, okay? So with that kind of increase, anyone that can afford to, meaning that they have pretty good health, that they're not fired, they're not laid off, as we know, all of this issues. They should wait at least until they're 66. Now, I have a lot of people who say, but what if there is no Social Security? Okay, then what do I do? This is an excuse. Ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be Social Security for the foreseeable future. So it is not an excuse. There's not a politician in America, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, that's going to try and destroy Social Security in our lifetimes. So if you can afford to, meaning health-wise, you should work at least until you're 66.
Or longer if you can and want to.
Ideally, longer, okay? And we'll get into it, but I have a different approach to what retirement actually is.
Right. Well, you mentioned Social Security and that there will be Social Security, but of course Social Security has been in the news to a degree, well, for a while.
Yeah.
That it and that we're not funding it adequately, that there won't be enough money there to keep the system going.
Yeah.
You're saying that that's not really shouldn't be a concern for
No,
folks?
it should not be. Any of us that are baby boomers should not be concerned that in our lifetime we'll see the end of Social Security. Now, there are not reasonable, but there are ways politicians can extend it, and the easiest one is to extend the age in which you can retire. So 66 to 70, or 66 to 67, and 67 to 60, over the years. Each one of those incremental steps will keep the Social Security Administration floating beyond the 2035 date in which they run out of money. So you could just extend the years that you before you can retire. And today, with all the advances in health, we're all living longer, women more than men, okay? So there is a reasonable timeline that says most people will live beyond 85 now, 85 to 95. So if they're going to live another 10 years, why not push their retirement to 69? Okay, and that will keep the Social Security Administration floating for our lifetime.
What happens for Generation X or the folks
The echo boomers.
Echo boomers, right. I mean, it sounds like they're maybe not in such a good situation.
No, unfortunately. But
should things stay the way they are?
Yes, okay. But they'll have many, many more years, okay, to save,
Right.
okay? So think about it. Do you know that there are more echo boomers than baby boomers? Anybody that was born in the 80s and 90s, okay, that's a larger proportion of the population. The people don't know that, they're baby boomers, okay?
Right. That's interesting.
And we are lucky in this country in the sense that just as the echo boomers are getting of age to get jobs and so forth, we, the baby boomers, are retiring. So we're handing it off. In fact, we're a little slow, okay? In fact, for the echo boomers, we're clogging up the system.
Right.
People like me that's working to I die or 72 or 73, I'm occupying a position that could be filled by 2 or 3 young people.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
You too.
Yeah, I know. I think about it every day.
So they're saying to us, come on, move, get going.
Yeah, right.
Get going. And they've got a point.
Well, so it sounds then like an IRA is really the best way for folks to save. You know,
Yes.
That's really your best route. If you don't have an IRA, you're saying get one going immediately. As soon as you finish watching the show, run out to the bank and
That's
or
absolutely
call your
right.
accountant or
Yes.
whatever it is you got to do.
And I'll get a little more complicated. Let's say you're in a small business.
Okay.
It's just one person, okay,
Yeah.
or whatever. The government gives you an opportunity because they recognize a risk in being a small business person, okay, that you could fail at any point. And so your savings for retirement is a bit riskier because you're taking these risks. The rewards are there too. So what they offer you is a self-employed person's IRA. Oh, well, this one, you can actually stash away 25% of your income or $44,000 a year, whichever is less. And you still have your IRA. So let's say you're a small business person in a construction company and you got 3 or 4 people working for you, or you just work on your own. and you're pulling in 120 grand, okay? You can actually take 25% of that, put it in a self-employed person's IRA, and take it right off your taxes. And it works just like an IRA. In other words, it's tax deferred. When you can't take it out before you're 59 and a half without taking a 10% tax penalty. Okay. But after you're 59 and a half, whatever your tax bracket is at 60, that's the taxes you're taxed on in your SEP or your IRA or even your 401k.
So just to jump back to something you alluded to earlier in the show, for the folks that, for one reason or another, whether it's their own fault or just circumstances, that are now approaching retirement age, don't have a nest egg or any savings to fall back on, are living paycheck to paycheck, I mean, what happens to those folks? I mean, and assuming that, their boss says, hey, 65, you're out, because we have to make room for the younger guy.
That's right.
I mean, what happens to these folks? Do they just sort of have to be helped along by their families or?
Yes, they don't retire because they can't afford to retire. You're seeing this more and more, by the way. And as I said, I'm not kidding you. When you look at the baggers in the supermarkets, you'll notice that most of them now are older people, okay, that are on Social Security, but they can't make ends meet. And you're right. What ends up happening is that they either depend on their families, a lot do, or they depend on the government, okay? Now, the government's terrified of this. Okay, think about it.
Sure.
That 19% that haven't saved anything, let's just continue and say it goes up to 25%. 25% of all baby boomers that have no money is going to be an enormous burden on the government. And they're terrified that this is the politicians, that this is what they face. Okay. One of the reasons I'm telling you that Social Security will be there is because given this kind of trend, the last thing that Washington's going to do is end Social Security. They've got to find a way, figure a way of supporting an enormous number of us that have no savings. Now, supporting them doesn't mean that that's a great lifestyle. Okay. For a lot of people in this country, I'm afraid that their golden years of retirement are going to be the worst years of their lives.
That's a sobering thought.
It is a sobering thought.
Just to move on a little bit, and perhaps lead to another sobering thought, one of the columns that you sent to us recently, which I found quite fascinating, was about folks who about how men have a harder time adjusting to retirement than women do. I found that quite interesting. I wondered if you could talk about that for a little bit. Why is that? I mean, is it just because men are just used to working all the time and have a harder time kind of just adjusting to like kicking back and not having something to do or whatever? Is that basically the core of it?
Well, that was Unhappily Ever After, which was the name of the column. And what I did find, you're right, that men have a much more difficult time of it than women. When they're polled, when retirees are polled, or people that are retiring, well over 66% of the people polled said retirement was going to be great. But actually less than 44%, when the pollsters went back to them, admitted that it was great. In fact, it was terrible. Okay. Now, men, it depends on the men, okay? A lot of men identify with their job. This is their ego. How much they make, how many men report to them, yada, 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 okay? So when they retire, there's nothing to replace it usually because they've worked all their lives, brought work home, they've worked extra hours. The job was their whole thing. So when they do retire, they haven't developed any outside activities for them to rely on for this transition. And it's an enormous transition. People don't realize that retirement is a change, a major change in their lives. Okay, everyone just thinks that it's somehow easy street, a boat on Golden Pond, and it's not. Okay, so for men especially, most men have a harder time socializing than women. Okay, take my wife. Okay, she's a chief operating officer at Berkshire Money Management, and she works all day, but she's got a thriving photography business on the side that she loves to do. okay, and she gets paid for it, not a lot, but she loves it. She's a member of several Berkshire organizations, the Humane Society, Abused Women, all the rest of this stuff. She's crazy about Facebook. She started a couple of organizations herself. So she's got an entire outside life, whereas me, what am I doing? I'm reading research, I'm looking at the market, I'm writing my column. That's about it, okay? That's about all I do. So
that sounds like a lot.
Well, that's the way I look at it, but
right.
none of it's outside.
Right.
Okay, so if I retired, I would be faced with the same issues, okay? Now, and for men, they literally go into depression. The incidence of addiction goes higher, whether it's an alcohol or pills or whatever. Their health deteriorates as well. So it's a surprising fact, and divorces increase, okay? Because what the men tends to do is, okay, they retire, okay, and then they're the lord of the house because they're no longer the boss in the assembly line. So the only thing left is to be the lord of the house, where they finally start to look around, okay, what's for dinner and what's in the kitchen and all the rest. And of course, what happens to the poor wife is oh, now you're taking interest in this 30 years later, okay, right. And you have no clue how to turn on the oven, all right, and it just deteriorates, okay.
Right. So, and might be more complicated by the fact that perhaps the wife is still working.
Yes.
She's younger, and now is the one who's the breadwinner. So
that's right. Oh, that's also an ego, an ego thing for the males.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of this because I have a lot of men and women who are not yet retiring but are planning to retire. And one of the first things that I tell them to do is, all right, start developing outside interest, okay, whatever that may be, and you're going to have to get more social, all right? So, it's go join the softball team, okay? Go figure out, there's Orvis, go figure out how to fly fish and get involved with a bunch of guys and women that fly fish. Or get a dog, all right? Go train your dog, or whatever it is.
Do something.
Do something, okay? Yeah. Also, start talking to your wife, okay? Or your spouse, okay? Yeah. I'm sure there are women like this too. But you have to include your spouse in your retirement plans, okay? You can't just spring that on somebody that you've lived with for 25 or 40 years, and here I am. I'm here all day long and all night long, and I don't want to do anything. Yeah. No. Okay, you've got to start planning how this is going to change your lives, both of you, and you have to agree to certain things. It's, as we all know, if you're still married, is a bunch of compromise. Well, this is the major new compromise in your life for the rest of your life. Retirement is simply another job. Okay, if you think instead that this is, as I said, easy street, it's not easy street. It's a change. It's a traumatic change. And I'm an advocate of not retiring in this sense, in the sense of doing nothing. Yeah. Okay, because doing nothing for the normal human being will last about 3 months. Yeah. Taking care of the grandkids, getting up late, watching the TV that you haven't had a chance, that stuff lasts 3 to 6 months. Right. And after that, you're looking at a wall.
Right. It sounds good from the outside, but it does evaporate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Well, just to close, I mean, you mentioned that the incidences of divorce tend to rise and spike a little bit when folks enter this period in their lives. I mean, it's kind of a grim topic, and I'm sure it's not one that a lot of people like to think about. But let's just say, for the talking purposes here, you and the spouse are contemplating a divorce at age 62, 63, whatever. What are the factors that need to go into that? Do you really have to kind of work through the emotional? I mean, that's got to be a horrible emotional toll, but I would imagine that it would be very important to kind of keep your eye on the financial ball and make sure that in your eagerness just to make the problem go away and kind of get out of it and move on to whatever the next thing is, that you just say, okay, fine, where do I sign, and let's get this over with. I imagine that you have to take a much harder approach, both sides.
My advice is not to divorce. Getting a divorce at that age for both parties is an economic catastrophe, okay? And especially for women. I've written a lot of columns about this. Women, for the most part, in this society, have not had the opportunity to work at a single job for all their lives. They'll have kids. They'll be out of the workforce 8 or 9 years. They'll go back to work. Something will happen, husband gets injured or whatever, they're back out again. Then their parents need them, okay, because they don't have enough money for retirement or because they're infirm or whatever, have to get out of the workforce again for that reason and back and forth. Well, think about what that does to Social Security, okay? Think about what that does for women's ability to save in a 401k or a 403b or even to contribute in an IRA. So by the time they're over 60, okay, because of the way society is, okay, and because they've got all these different roles, they're in terrible shape as far as savings, all right? And to make matters worse, women typically live 5 years longer than men, okay? There's a horrible statistic that widows between 55 and 67, an enormous number of them live in poverty for these reasons, okay? So when you divorce, if you're 62, 61, 63, for a woman, it is devastating. So my economic advice, if this is going to happen, women out there, you better go for the throat, okay? Because you're going to need every dime. But I would prefer to see a man and a woman simply leave each other, go get an apartment, the other person has a house, stay married, okay? Because the splitting up of assets, okay, whether it be a house or an apartment, your 401k, your IRAs, whatever, when you have that and you go out on your life, you think about it. Two can live a lot cheaper than one, okay? Now you have two people living as one with half the resources they had the day before they got divorced. No matter how much you hate your spouse, learn to compromise, shake hands, stay married, live in a different place, a different life, but keep yourself as an economic couple. That I would do.
Yeah.
That I would do.
Good advice there. Well, Bill, what more we could probably talk about, and we will. I think we'll have to have you back here for another show and talk about the economy in general. I'd love like to. I say, I enjoy reading your columns that you send us about the economy and the financial markets, and always very insightful and well written too, which is not always the case with a lot of financial stuff. But so we'll have to have you back here, and we'll talk about the big picture of the U.S. economy and the global economy as well. What's happening out there, and what seems to be coming along in the financial markets and what have you. So,
I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here today, and it's been a great conversation.
Okay.
And thank all of you for watching. This has been the Front Page on GNAT TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal. It's been my pleasure. Have a great day.